Well, hello. My name is SherriAnneDuffy-King, and I'm the writer of the title of the Crucified Innocent series. And right now we are reading The Prince in the Mirror, Book 2 of my series. Alright, and we are on Chapter 34, Elven Massacre. Now let's continue on with our journey, right? Let's get going. William was astonished at how him and Ollivander had arrived, sailing into a swirling vortex opening. They sailed down, and then whatever gravity that pulled them turned them to stand on the coral floor. He had only heard of this place in the myths and boogie tales. William turned to look back at the opening. From his point of view, the ship was horizontally turned, floating above the alcove opening. He saw Evie's flame of hair and watched bemused as the swirling ocean closed like a kaleidoscope. It was utterly breathtaking. Ollivander patted him on the shoulder. "William, we have a mission. I'm gonna need you, so turn and come with me. I can't enter without you. You are the one who holds Evie's beg for assistance." With Ollivander taking up his view, William understood. He smiled and nodded. "Aye, sorry, I'm coming." Ollivander moved out of William's vision, turned and walked away toward the most amazing coral jungle William had ever seen. Paths led up high in the trees, and the spheric balls of light danced on branches, but one huge webbed light hung high all of the other um above all the others, and it was the elves' power source. All right. He walked after Ollivander, and the closer he got to the power source, he soon realized that the webbed sphere was suspended from thin air. The web that clung to the netted ball disappeared. The smell of something disturbing suspended in the air. William watched as Ollivander tightened his shoulders in alarm. They followed a path to a bunch of coral flowers surrounding a piece of plank etched in the base of a coral tree. Ollivander yanked it open, throwing himself behind the door. William pulled out his sword and ran after his comrade. He was stopped short by the size of Ollivander's back. William stepped back, brushed his free hand through his blond-white locks that pushed into his eyes, then stepped from behind Ollivander to take in the surroundings. The cavern was huge. The walls were clear, and high above the domed roof stood the source of power, towering up high, the light shining bright like a caged flame. William shielded his eyes at the floating lights near the power ball, then brought his eyes back to the room they were in. Small bloodied bodies scattered around, heads gone blood-drenched every surface. Ollivander turned away, hiding the hunger and shame. William walked forward. The smell was overbearing. Small fly-tails danced around the bodies, lying their larvae and then dying. William walked over to the coral throne. In the seat a small head was piked on the top of the back, with the spike stuck in the seat protruding upward. William wiped the sweat from the top of his lip and forehead around the bottom of forehead. And around the bottom of the coral throne, arms' legs were pushed outward a couple of inches apart, like the sun's beams. Fingers were black and blue, and sneakers were pointed downward. Foot, arm, foot, foot, arm, foot. A set of steps a couple feet away dropped from the platform, and on the second step from the bottom rested a torso. On the lump of the trunk a piece of parchment was pinned down with two slices of glass shards like a needle to cloth, pinned in it in place. Blood oozed down the shards, drying to black crustaceans. The fly-tails were absorbently active in their pursuit of the torso and head, like bees to a nest. On the bloody parchment read, but William wasn't able to read it out loud, because as soon as he crossed to grab the parchment, someone flashed into the domed cavern, flashed all the bodies into some other place. William grasped onto the paper and the flash, and what happened was, he went to grab the paper, right? Somebody flashed in, grabbed him as he grabbed the parchment, and then they both were gone. All right? And that person who grabbed them both and it brought them to where Evie was and Lucinda. All right. So as soon as William turned his face toward the person holding his hand, he caught a glimpse of a stone dwarf. His face was a gargoyle smiling. Then the creature was gone, and he was standing in front of Lucinda. Chapter 35, King of My Heart. Evie almost fainted. Her heart was racing, and hands were clinging to her, the weight of their body pushing up from the surface. Sand pressed against his skin. He shook it off, climbing and pulling at Evie. She wasn't sure what was going on, nor did she care. Evie pulled Iolaus to the surface, her arms under his. The heat of his bleh, the heat of his animal form pressing against hers. The animal instinct overtook Iolaus as he clung to Evie, falling to the jungle chords of the island like Lake Drea slumbering by. Evie kissed Iolaus, and he returned it, his hands holding her everywhere, their breathing coming in gasping moans of pleasure. He shimmied her shirt open and slid her breeches down. The heated moment was fogging up clarity. Evie pushed herself up to the floor. Iolaus kissed Evie more, holding her lovingly against the ground, spreading her thighs and resting some weight on top of her. Oh, how he missed her! The thought came in loud and clear. He picked up her thighs from beneath his palms and lifted them up, and pressing his shaft slowly up inside of her. Her gasp was intoxicating and worthwhile. He pulled out and pushed back in, the thunder of their hearts clamoring loud in their bodies and ears. His vortex of pleasure was complete. He continued the primal love-making, going deep and coming out, to reunite himself with her. Her sweet yet quiet moans were what kept him with the ongoing sexual arousal. With a large spark of pleasure she lifted up for the first time since the actual first time, without medicated concoctions to dilute her love. Evie dug deep into his flesh, her nails pressing deep. She opened her mouth and slammed it against his shoulder, biting down deeply. Blood slid down his back, intertwining with the deep throttling sweats. The pain was worth the ride he induced with her. Iolaus looked into Evie's unnaturally blue eyes, pulled out of Evie and away from her grasp. She sat dazed, panting from the overpowering pleasures they had just shared. Soon Iolaus thought she would come to her senses, crying shamefully. He pulled his weight from her, turning his back to her in thought. Then he stood, brushed off his bottoms and shirt. The remaining sand fell to the floor. Then he pulled on his dirty cloak. Without saying a word, Iolaus helped Evie up and dusted off her clothes painstakingly, handing them to her. He yearned to hold her and not worry about the chaos, but he was given a second chance to make it all right. She took them and dazedly put them back on. Iolaus, Evie whispered it to his back. But he just stood still, thinking. Evie felt the pain of shame, but brushed it away. Iolaus turned around, facing her. Evie lifted her hands to hug him and console him, but instead of doing what she liked, Iolaus pulled some dust from his pocket and blew some into her face. It froze her, stunning her muscles. Iolaus guided her to sit down, then said the words that would reawaken her, but only to take away the last few minutes. Evie blinked, shook her head, and tried to push away the forming headache. Then she saw Iolaus kneeling next to her. "Oh, Iolaus, you're alive! How can this be? Oh, who cares? You're back, and I'm so happy." Evie threw herself at Iolaus, hugging and kissing him deeply. Iolaus pulled away and helped her up. "I'm fine, Evie. Lake Drea healed me again. Let's get back to the others." Chapter 36, Sycamore of Salt. The brush of jungle opened up to an awaiting Aiden and Lucinda. Lusuasing was poking at a couple of jubies in the pond. They danced jubilantly, then spit hot water at Lusuasing, who shifted his body into water and bubbles to easily avoid the scorching blows. Lucy turns to Evie, her smile dropping as she gazed at Iolaus. Aiden's eyes widened, as did Lusuasing's. How? How? No, I'm just kidding. He only says how once. And loud, right? A burst of light blinded everyone as Eldwin, the stone dwarf, appeared. Another swirl of air, and Ollivander and William were with him. Their faces were grave. William was holding a scroll partially open, but the writing was illegible, and in Eldwinian, which William couldn't understand. Evie could read it as if it were in her own home tongue. But what surprised her about the scroll was that it was ripped and blood-soaked. William held it out to Evie, and she opened it and read aloud. Sweet strumpet, this is what happens to your fellow comrades if you continue treason against me, and the punishment will be by far more unpleasant than imaginable for you. With love, Sire Akmolutra Novelle. Anger filled Evie's veins. Lucy crossed between William Ollivander and Eldwin to get to Evie, grabbing for the desecrated scroll before Evie blew her top. That infurious bastard, how could he? William Ollivander, what did you find down there? William and Ollivander shared a sympathetic gag look of shame, but before they could get anything out, Eldwin answered, his voice as deep as gravelly bass as before. Princess Ariana, nothing but chaos, as in Edenwood when I swooped in to retrieve the two. Bodies were flung everywhere, but I don't want to dampen your mood with trifle worry. Evie turned and screamed an unnatural sound, not heard since from an actual siren. Everyone cringed in the ear poison she was releasing into the air. Lucy jumped for Evie, clasping her palm over Evie's mouth, suspending the sound. I know, Evie, but not the right place, especially so close to the keepers of the sky. My mother, Queen Bristol, will not tolerate such ordinances. This sacred place needs to stay undiluted from anger and your race's sirenic behavior. Please, my friend. Evie looked into Lucy's sympathetic eyes and dropped the vibrations from within. Lucy's sympathetic eyes. Lucy unclasped her mouth, pulling away. I apologize. I don't know what has gotten into me. I will refrain, my friend. William pointed in awe at the creature coming up from Lake Drea, their skin the color of the night sky, deep royal blue, black. Clouds seemed to pass behind their skin. Planets so brilliant shone from their stomachs. Three appeared, one in the center with the other two on either side. Evie spotted a comet pass from the left hermit, crossing the middle one and exiting from the one on the right. Evie was dumbfounded. The comet disappeared, but the amazement was still floating in midair. The center one had long black hair, straight and glimmering, like a loose black vortex circling her head, touching the bottom of her thighs. Although none wore clothes, their bodies weren't visibly naked. The one in the middle had her eyes black with little white cages and a black flame dancing in either eye. Her ears were pointed upward like a cat or gremlin. Her lips were black with white specks. They glided across the lava lake and stepped onto the jungle bank. Lava oozed away from their bodies, dripping magnificently onto the jungle cords, igniting them with life. The cords glowed a neon lime, then faded a bit. The two on either side of the woman were dressed within a matter of seconds. The robe Sorry about that brief pause. Let's get back into this. Now, with robes covering their forms, the only thing showing were their eyes. One had yellow flames pushed from black cages, and the other one had blue flames, and the other one had green flames. And each of them were like to see my eyes. Okay, imagine a little black bird cage, right? Right. Each of them had a little black bird cage with a flame in it. Okay. Now, each of these hermits had different colored eyes. One had blue, one had green, one had yellow. It's crazy. It was a great idea for me because I thought it would be cool. But their bodies look like the night sky, so that's cool too. Evie was awestruck. Mother! Both Ollivander and Lucinda hollered in happiness. The center hermit, now dressed in black robe with dancing silver charms dangling around her. On her head, a bright silver diamond tiara rested. The queen smiled and hugged her children. What struck Evie, um, what struck Evie as unnatural was that Queen Bristol looked about 14, and her own children, although youthful, looked a tad bit older. But Evie smiled at the nice family reunion. The excitement soon calmed down, and Queen Bristol turned to Evie, smiling. My dear old friend, Princess Ariana. Come with me and bring your friends. There is much to discuss and not a lot of time to work with. Evie followed her. Evie followed, and her flock of friends did the same. Chapter 37, Unwritten Apologies. Recrossing Lake Drea, the Queen led the way. A hidden gash in the rock mountains opened to meet them. Everyone disappeared behind the gash, except for Iolaus and Aiden. Iolaus refused to let Aiden pass. Get out of my way, Iolaus. Aiden seethed in harsh whispers, but was upset that Iolaus was back and being a pushy bastard once more. But Iolaus didn't back down. He stood his ground, head up and nose tilted, as if ready to discipline a mere infant. Aiden, I need to speak to you alone. Aiden glared back but didn't say anything. Iolaus continued to speak. I know I've done wrong. Oh, how I know. I live in lies after lies. But I wouldn't apologize to my own stinking brother for the chaos he helped me build over the years. Aiden grumbled deep down, impatient as he was. Is there a point to this story, or are you just going to keep rambling on and on about how spoiled you and your twin are? Iolaus smiled, fighting the anger beneath his skin. No, I do have a point. I'm sorry for everything I've ever done to you and your family, and especially toward Evie. I know my words don't mean much, but when we finish, I will be a better king than you have ever known, and a friend of sprawled out harmony across our land. I hope you can forgive me, although I deserve none and expect no forgiveness. Aiden looked hard into Iolaus's cold eyes and noticed a small glint of hope and plea. He accepted the apology, but was forever alert when it came to Iolaus. Forgiveness was going to have to take time, and healing patience was a long way away. Fine, I accept your apology. Iolaus beamed a smile, then turned and disappeared through the gash. Aiden followed and wondered deeply about what was going to come next. Chapter 38, Apothecary of Drona. Queen Bristol guided the lot through a large corridor toward a large room that she called the Apothecary of Drona. The ceiling held a large night sky with immense clouds surrounding the outside of it. Evie thought it might have been a pretty epic painting, but the sky moved, as did the clouds. Stars and planets tilted and soared. In the very center was a large throne, made of gold. Wisps of golden and white mist seethed from the chair. Evie gawked in wonder. It took her a moment to focus on what was going on in the room. She brought her head down and looked around the apothecary. Below the ceiling rested a Catholic praying station. A cross with Earth's Jesus was gladly hanging on the wall. It was made up out of white marble. Below sat a hole with his tomb opened, and another setting of him, arms spread out, with fresh streams of light igniting his golden brown locks. Before him a praying Magdalene, arms out in front of her, sprawled out on the ground, praying visible. Below that a praying Mary, her eyes skyward as she was holding her own. Candles of every color scattered around the room, emanating a soft glow. The wind scattered the crackling marble walls. Evie looked to the ground, surrounding her a marble map of constellations and pews of deep mahogany. Everything was amazing. The doors to the apothecary were made out of marble with strips of gold and mahogany wood. No handles. On either side of the double doors that seemed to reach the very ceiling, lined against the walls, were other praying symbols. Portraits of all Earth's gods and idols, Umbala's god, Elder's god, Athormia's god. Gold, silver, and paintings brightened the coinciding walls. This room was utterly breathtaking. Evie hadn't noticed before because of how dark the painting writings on the constellation map said, but now it was glowing in the center. Everything has a purpose, from the smallest insecticide to the tormented god holding up the planets. As the words got brighter, they started to change. Evie bent low and started to read the next set of glowing words. Ariana, my sweet child, of the world. You can't save everyone from their doomed fate. It's not your place to pick and choose. It's hers. Below the words, a small etching, that of a lifelike child with big strawberry curls, and Evie's eyes appeared. I know, but I don't want the weight to fall on her shoulders. I only want peace for her. She is my child. I couldn't sacrifice my child as you have done to, test the universe in many cases. I know that they were all for a reason, but please, I beg you, don't. I beg you, don't let it come to pass. Nihilda told me that every beginning has a price. I will do all I can to make sure fate is unable to happen. The writing scrawled out more bright and angry message. I did what I had to for the greater good. You will see how sacrifices we make alter the way time may encounter the future. Evie cried no so loud in her head that the flames and wind altered in the room. Then all went calm. Ariana, what are you doing on the floor? We have very important stuff to talk about. Evie looked up to Queen Bristol. Aiden walked over and helped Evie up. The heat under his shirt was unbearable. Evie was fighting passion. Oh, I'm sorry, Bristol. I was just looking at something. What did you say? Queen Bristol smiled, then continued on. As I was saying, nothing will be done about the battles to come. We were instructed to stand down and watch what must unfurl. Fate is inevitable, I'm sorry. But as we Skykeepers must bow down to the almighty Aneo. Evie gasped, stood, and closed the path between Queen Bristol and herself. What? There is nothing that you can do to help assist us? With a sigh, Queen Bristol shook her head. I know, but we were commanded to stay away from your cause. The only ones not held by this law are my children. Evie dropped her gaze to the ground, thinking about all that had happened. Queen Bristol continued on. Ariana, it is written that you will survive, so don't fret. My children will help you, and all will be well. Either way, fate chooses, all right? All right, my friend, I accept what is meant, but I am frightened, not because of events I helped to set up, but because you have graver news. Ah, I almost forgot. I foresaw a wave of the battle to come. I choose not to reveal all to you, but I do ask you to look to the light for help when graveness and gloom are near. Nice synogram, but I'm fuzzy on what it will mean. Ariana, when the time comes to look up for help, that's all it means. Evie shifted from one foot to the other for a moment or so. Okay, that I will do then. I need to ask one more thing. Queen Bristol smiled even brighter, her black lips with white specks stretching. Yes, Ariana? I need to ask about the floor. Does it usually speak to anyone else? Yes, the template of Almighty Aneo speaks to Anna and Evwa. Both Queen Bristol's followers stepped forward. Evie recognized them from earlier and remembered them from Iosa's story. One had yellow flames for eyes, and the other had blue and green flames hidden behind black cages. Ariana, they call the apothecary of Drona by another name, Hall of Answers. I hope Aneo was informative, and our time here has come to an end. Evie sat on the pew, thinking about what Aneo had said. Then, with a flash of light, all of Evie's followers were surrounded by brush. The pew was gone and replaced by a rock covered in moss and mildew. A stream of water and birds filtered the air.